Hey everybody, welcome back to the garage, and I'm still trying to get some of this stuff sorted out here, so bear with me. You're probably going to see some wonky stuff happening before this part actually comes up based on when I launch this live stream. But I want to go ahead and take a moment to thank everybody that is the new subscribers. We had a slew of new subscribers come in yesterday. It was awesome. I appreciate everybody's support, and hopefully we can get a lot of these people helped out with tuning. Hopefully I don't do anything stupid on this live stream, and I'm sitting here watching the preview, which says this is what's kind of been going on, and I look like an idiot. So nonetheless, I do want to do a quick drawing for the patrons out there over on the Patreon. I'll put a link down below here and there's also one down in the description. We are giving away the eBay Turbo tonight, and I've got all 27 entrants on this list here. I'm getting ready to hit a random number 1 through 27 that is going to determine who wins the Turbo. So let's see what we get here. 22, number 22. Let's see who that is. And 22 is Stephen G. I will be in touch with you, Stephen. Congratulations. So that being said, let's jump on here. Hey, Zero. Hey, Harry, Robert, Jeff, Burley, Adam. What's going on, everybody? It's good to see everybody in here tonight. What is new? What do we want to talk about tonight? Hopefully you guys can hear me all right. Let me know if you can't. I've got the volume kind of dialed down a little bit. I did pick up a new microphone, so hopefully that comes through a little bit better. And, oh, by the way, welcome to the new format for Intune, the live Goat Rope Garage tuning show where we talk about cars, performance, tuning, any questions that you guys can come up with, etc., etc. So, that being said, let's talk a little bit real quick while you guys start queuing up some questions about the third mode of airflow tuning on our vehicles, and specifically on the Gen 3s and Gen 4s. The third mode of airflow tuning is idle airflow tuning. I've had a lot of people ask me about airflow tuning or idle tuning in particular here recently, and I want to touch on it that this if you go and look at a tune, whenever it shows you which is in control, you have an idle status that is in control. As soon as you give it some throttle, as soon as it registers throttle through your throttle sensor, it then switches over into a that's whenever you go into open loop, closed loop, mass airflow, speed density, whatever modes that you have enabled. But that idle airflow mode is the one that a lot of people seem to have issues with, specifically after doing a new cam. And a couple quick tips that we'll get into here before we start answering questions from the chat room is don't get caught up on the timing on idle tuning. I see a lot of people dive directly into the timing. The timing is not going to be that dramatically different unless you might have something like forced induction that is shifting where your cylinder air mass is on idle. That's where you're going to see the biggest issues. If you think it's hard tuning a cam, try tuning a cam with forced induction on there. But that being said, you have to focus on just the airflow side of it on the idle. If you are working on the Gen 4s, Gen 5s, later Gen 4s, and the Gen 5s, some of those are torque-based idle, and those things are, let me tell you, they are a pain in the ass. If you have the option, and some of the Gen 5s do have the option to switch over to airflow off of torque, I suggest you do that and then start tuning your idle through the airflow table, the idle airflow table as opposed. But other than that, you just got to kind of play with the values. You got to see what works for you. You need to try and capture some data as it starts to see if you're running rich or running lean, and you will generally start to see a trend that coincides with the cam and the overlap that you're dealing with. So that's kind of one of the big ones. Let's go ahead and go over to live chat over here and see if anybody's got any questions tonight. How's everybody doing? Infiltrators, good to see you again. Gio, how's it going, brother? Thank you for joining in, everybody. We've got a pretty good crowd going so far, which makes sense because we've got so many awesome new subscribers lately. Thank you, everybody. Whoever's been sharing this stuff, I appreciate you guys, too, because it has been making a huge difference. We're getting a lot of influx of new blood. So somebody's got to have a question. If not, somebody just let's talk about something. What are we, anybody excited about the new Corvette, the mid-engine Corvette? Have you seen this thing? Have you looked in the engine bay? Who wants to work on one of these things? Robert, man, I appreciate it, Robert. Let me know if there's anything in particular that you need help with. PCM Cobra, welcome back, brother. Zero, how about maxing out a map and letting it roll into the SD tune? Zero, I mean, you could do that. It would be interesting to see how you would do that transition, because I'm afraid that if you get to the point of maxing out the map without disabling the MAF error codes, I don't know how well that transition would actually work out. So that's a good question. That might be something that I need to look into and see if there's a way to actually do that transition from MAF. I don't know that anybody's really maxing it out and then just going straight into speed density. But we could actually test that out on some stuff and see what happens, because honestly, we could probably bring down the MAF scale or change where the max set point is on the MAF hertz. But I don't know that you can do that without throwing a check engine light. Harry, the name Goat Rope Garage comes from down south. A goat rope is whenever you are, it's like herding cats. You've probably heard that. If you ever heard somebody say, well, I'm going to a goat rope, it's going to a situation where everybody's kind of got their heads up their asses. Straw was mean if your coils are not firing. I was driving my car, thought I ran out of my gas, and I'm not getting any fire to it off of all of your coils. Straw, you're probably going to have an issue with your driver on your ECM, PCM, that actually, you have 8 outputs on your ECM that drive your coils individually. So basically the way that a coil works on these is they have a capacitor in there that grabs all of the, builds up the power, and then there is a relay trigger. So you have a low amperage trigger that comes from your ECM to trigger your coil to fire. That being said, if all of your coils are not firing, it's probably going to have something to do with your ECM that's gotten burned up. I'm not sure how on the inside of those ECMs is probably solid state. And that stuff, if it gets any kind of amperage across, it has a tendency to burn up. Geo, you're having an issue with flare up on startup. Just where it's runaway idle, basically. Robert H. Place to start increasing boost on E93 V6 twin turbo. What do you mean by place E92? What do you mean, Robert H, as far as where to increase boost? Paul, where can I get that kind of horsepower in the base 2020 Vet for 60K? You can get that kind of horsepower in about anything for 60K. Anything that's got an LS in it. Brand new, no, but... Robert, what are the real advantages and disadvantages to keeping or removing the map on the Turbo LS? Well, you're not going to flow air much better without it, Robert. To be honest with you, the big advantage is based on your intricacies of your piping. MAF sensor to operate properly needs laminar flow, and so I generally try to do at least twice the diameter of the tube, if not 3 times the diameter of the tube, to make sure I have a straight shot of air. You can also use air conditioners. Not AC like we used to keep cool, but there are some companies that have inserts that can go into your intake pipe that have basically a whole bunch of little beehive, honeycomb looking tubes in there that help to condition the air before it hits your mass airflow sensor. The other time that you might have an issue running MAF is whenever you have a very lopey cam where you get some air bleed over from intake to exhaust, and because whenever you have that kind of overlap, you are metering a certain amount of air, but if some of it is escaping out of the exhaust, suddenly you have less air and more fuel, and it's really hard to tune for that on that cam. Geo, you're running the Nick Williams 105 on a 4th gen truck intake, and you've done all the adjustments and stuff. Are you still running the stock intake manifold with that 105? Or I'm guessing you're probably not, because I don't know that the Nick Williams 105 will fit on the stock intake. Robert H., let's look at, give me an example. What vehicle are you talking about, Robert H.? I know you said it's an E92. Tell me a specific vehicle. Let me see if I've got something that we can look at. Paul, I personally have not done any timing tuning or have not done any tuning on a direct injected turbocharged LNF Ecotech. Now, I have done tuning on a direct injected supercharged L83. Marcus Manelli, a Mopar trick. Have you ever used an old knock sensor, screwed it in the front of a head, and ran wire into your VCM data port so you can map knock voltage? Log it. Marcus, I don't know necessarily why you would need to do that. We have, on the GMs, we have knock sensors already. And they're either on the block or they're in the intake, or they're in the valley of the block. Robert, give me a year on the CTS-V Sport, please. Marcus, the GM knock sensors are pretty accurate at detecting pre-detonation and pinging, so you can generally use those to tune your timing without much issues. Hey everybody, if you've just recently come into the channel or come into the live chat, go ahead and post up any questions. We are just talking about tuning and just kind of answering questions as they come across. We're getting ready to look at a CTS V-Sport config file. I might have to grab one for a 2016. Awesome. Let me pull one up here. Give me a second. I will be right back. (2016) Cadillac. Come on, baby. CTS. Keep your questions coming, people. I will jump on them as I can. What's a decent pulse width at idle on a P59? Are you talking an injectors, Zero? Robert, yeah, well, hold on a second. Let's look at this here. Because you piqued my interest, so jump over to the tune screen here. Ha! Zero, I will let you know what the beer of the week is tomorrow. Okay. Wow. Let's see here. Robert Coe, what were you doing with those heated seats? I was backwards. I was reverse engineering the LIN bus communications on the Gen 5s because that is a communications protocol for the factory switches to work. The factory switches actually have a little microprocessor in them that whenever they have to be pulled by a device to even wake up, and then whenever they wake up, they respond with a message. It's in hex. you know, and it's something like 16 bytes long, or 16 bits long, I should say, and then you have to decipher that, then tie that back to a device that can decode it, and then output to another device that will uh, that will yeah, that will actually run like a MOSFET power supply. It was overcomplicated, but it's the only way to get the factory switches to work in a vehicle that doesn't have that. So let me go back here and look at what we're talking about, Robert, and make sure that I'm on. You're wanting to increase boost on the E90. This is the V6. I'm looking at the wrong configuration. There is not a configuration for this out there, Robert. I'll have to do some follow-up on that. I'll tell you what, come around to next week's channel. Maybe I'll have some information where we can look at it. The driver demand table that you're talking about, though, is I don't know that that's necessarily tied directly to boost on these factory turbocharged cars. I don't have a lot of experience with those, but it is tied to the torque output of the engine. And my guess is if it's anything like the standard LT1, LT, LS or L83, L86s, Robert, they most likely will limit the duty cycle on the wastegate, or will go 100% duty cycle on the wastegate, much in the same way that they will pull timing and close the throttle body whenever you max out your torque settings. I don't know if that even answers your question, but that is a partial reason why you have to adjust driver demand and adjust the torque tuning tables, the virtual torque on these things. Zero Factor X, I can't get under 2.1. You can't get under 2.1? Send me a log. I want to see what you got going on. I don't know that 2.1 is necessarily that bad. I was looking at an L83 that was running in the 2s on idle. So, any tips, Adam? Any tips on where to start tuning into a 6-liter LQ4 L102 stage 2 stock camp? Man, you got a lot going on. Speed density, first time tuning, and it's also a drift car. I have quite a bit of information out there on the LQ4s, not necessarily just the LQ4s, but do look at the tuning playlist. It is down in the description box below, Adam. There's a lot of information to digest there. Start there. That's a lot more than I can get into just right here, but if you go through, it will go into how to do speed density tuning, how to set up your maps and your graphs, and kind of get started on that. And then with as much stuff as you've got going on there, you'll have to use the elephant approach, which basically means take it one small bite at a time. That's how you eat a whole elephant. Mr. Watts, S. Watts, how much does the heat of the day affect speed density tuning? Log in early morning on my way to work, make changes, seems to, well, okay, that is, Watts, that is what closed loop is for. Okay, so there are temperature compensations. If you look at a tune, hold on a second, we'll jump over here. There are temperature compensations for a tune on your airflow. If we look at airflow, dynamic, speed density here, we've got RPMs, temp corrections, stuff like that. Now, we don't, apparently, based on some of the platforms, we're not going to have direct access to the temperature compensation tables, because these are kind of a known factor. As it gets hotter, they generally have to, based on your pressures and things like that, this is what it has to do with the air. So you have to think about, on speed density, we're looking at pressures, we're looking at barometric pressure, you were looking at humidity in a lot of situations, we're looking at temperature. So all of those things come into effect, but this will happen, and this is why we end up going back. Try to get within 3 or 4% watts on your speed density tune, then go back over, put your closed loop sensors back in, and see if that does not kind of get everything tightened back up for you. What up, Michael? Yeah, Zero, I can go back and find it, man. I'm real bad about keeping up to date on these things. But as I said, you're probably not doing too bad on 2.1 milliseconds at idle. It's what I mean, I wouldn't worry about milliseconds on that. I would just look at AFRs. Just see what your AFR is doing. Make sure I'm not missing anything here. Got a lot of people in here today. I appreciate all the participation, everybody. It's awesome. Seeing a lot of people pop in here, a lot of familiar faces. Love seeing that. Hey, Robert H., do me a favor and hit up the comments of this video afterwards and remind me I want to get a copy of your configuration. I want to look at this twin turbo V6. This was causing a huge rich spike coming off throttle. Huge rich spike coming off throttle up high in the RPMs with DFCO turned on. Dogs are going crazy. I don't know if you guys can hear that. Well, Marcus, the NOx sensors on these GMs will register in such small amounts that you can see them into a tenth of what they would consider degree pull. And so by the time you're actually seeing any of it, you're way ahead of it. And honestly, as long as you have your low octane map set up properly, you would have a hard time doing damage on something like this unless you just literally had a really bad tune dumped in there that was doing something stupid. Rubber coat, stock 5.3 decapped injectors in the VS Racing 7875 and a 2000 short bed single cab. How much boost do I need to do a rolling burnout at 50 miles an hour? Hell, I don't know. You tell me. Go out there and try it and come back and report. Hey, Rogelio. Appreciate it, man. Zero, you're getting that richness even with DFCO going on. Yeah, send me a log of that. If you can catch that on a log, I'd like to see that. There's probably something funky going on that we can catch. Awesome, Michael. Report back next week whenever we have next week's. We're going to try and do this. I'm going to try and do this every Thursday at 8. So I enjoy it a lot. Seems to help you guys out a lot. Hey, Joe, welcome. Rogelio, do you even have an idea of what the injectors are? Like the rating for the injectors? Because generally, if you know the flat flow rate without knowing the pressure curve, you can still kind of get away of just putting that across. If you were to go in and look at your fuel and this may not be a good one. Let's see if I can find the injector table here. Yeah, Rogelio, I mean, you've got to realize, like, on Gen 3s and Gen 4s, you have an injector table that shows you... Let me open one up here. Let's just look at this. Let's go to one of my favorites. Let's jump over and look at a GTO. Look at the fuel... flow rate versus KPA. So generally, you know what the flow rate is. So you got 1000s. Okay. Did you put 1000s like across the whole flow rate chart? Because you can do that, but then you have to appropriately uh, dial your fueling in or your airflow in. Theoretically, your injectors should flow the same. So let's think about this. There's some okay, this gets very complicated. So there is some adjustment that's made based on voltage. That's because as you add or subtract volts from the fuel pump, it changes your output fuel rate. On the old systems that were not PWM, that maybe were returnless with a regulator and the fuel rails, hopefully you are maintaining kind of an injection pressure of around 45, 50 psi, whatever the factory psi rate is. And then you try and get in, your injector dialed in on that. So if they're supposed to be 1,000, assume that they're 1,000 around that 45 psi. Now, the idea behind it is whenever you go into something like speed density tuning with those injectors, they should scale your map. You will have to adjust the map, but it should scale based on the pressure, because that pressure that is shooting out of your injector is pressing against the pressure in your manifold. So as you raise pressure up, it should be fairly consistent based on, kind of how we do speed density tuning. It's just going to require a lot more speed density tuning to get that kind of dialed in. Same ordeal with mass airflow sensor. It is less dependent on that pressure because it is a mass-based calculation. It doesn't necessarily look at pressures. But if you can get a number that will get you running Regilio on your injectors, good enough to go out and tune, you can then tune your map against that number. It does not have to match what the actual injector pressure or flow rate is at that pressure, and your map adjustments that you make should be fairly accurate. Tune it, a couple percent rich, if that makes sense. Burley Brown, I use AEM widebands almost exclusively, have for the last 6-7 years now. Let me see here. I'll shoot you the link to the one. I would get the one that has the ability to change your output to lambda, because it just makes it a little bit easier if you don't have to do the math on the back side. So let me see if I can find it here. Bingo. Come on, copy. There we go. Well, I say that. Now it's being a pain in the ass here. There we go. Let's try that. There you go, Burley. That's the one that I use. Robert, you turn off DFCO for data logging. That way, whenever you let off the throttle, it doesn't go full lean. So it will actually, you're not worried about tuning. Basically, what is here? Let me pull it up here. You're not worried about tuning. Oh man, I love it. This strip up here. This strip is where it's going to be your DFCO area. So you're not necessarily worried about tuning that. You want to be able to, whenever you get back into throttle, you don't want to have to come from full lean back into fueling. So you want fueling to remain consistent. So that's why we turn off DFCO. KT on a fresh build 2000 5.3, 598 601 cam, headers, cold air, flex fuel injectors, turbo 400. What would you adjust first with the MPVI-2? Running a little rich. What have you done so far, KT, as far as the tuning steps? It's air, fuel, spark. Nothing wrong with that, Dink. Just let me know if you need any clarification or have any more in-depth questions. Joe, working to tune an SD Tune Gen 3 when making changes to the primary VE table, do I have to make the same changes to the secondary VE table also? Like high and low. Well, no. Yes, no. You've got one of the wonky ones that's got the primary and the secondary table. Just check what I like to do, Joe, is based on that. Generally, your secondary VE table is in a different manifold air pressure range. So double check that. Make sure that it is not the same ranging between the two, and then if it is in if the secondary VE table is a separate range, create a new airflow error map or graph in your scanner based off that secondary VE table, so you can collect data for both tables at the same time. Michael Breakall, I did not watch the games last week. I had company in town, so I missed it. I've got tickets to next week's game with the Brewers, which hopefully we'll actually win that one. Sounds good, Rogelio. Give that a shot. Jorge, I talked a little bit about tuning for a cam earlier. I will try and make a video here soon, but basically you just need to treat cam tuning. Are you talking about idle specifically or all the way? I mean, tuning for a cam is like tuning for about any other modification. You have changed the airflow dynamics of the engine, the way that the engine breathes in, and so you need to just tune for the altered airflow. It's a little bit more in depth on the idle side of it. I will give you that, but outside of idle, it is just standard tuning, procedure. Ross, thanks for all the education. You're welcome. DF Goblin Kit Car. DF Goblin Kit Car. I've never even heard of one of these. DF Goblin Kit Car. Boo, boo, boo. Oh, man, that looks fun. And you've got an Ecotech in that. Corey, Coyote content. I hope, Corey, I might do some videos on coyotes. I don't have a coyote to personally mess with right now. I wish I did, but that doesn't mean we can't dive into the tune and kind of look at some of the stuff, because the basics of tuning is the same no matter what the platform is. Just what parameters or what tables that you have to mess with. What about the trans? Jorge, I mean, what are you wanting to do with the trans other than just firm the shifts up a little bit? Yeah, Joe, as I said, set up that secondary graph, and that way you can tune both graphs at the same time. Thank you, Zero. Hey, Paul. Welcome back. What do you mean, Carol? Nothing with the two. KT Carol, what do you mean? You're scared to mess with anything, so it's stock. Don't be scared. You're not going to mess anything up. Blue Fox, I have got a laundry list of things that I need to do. There's just so many hours in the day and so many days in the week. I have not forgotten about doing some EcoBoost stuff. You don't really have to mess with the trans on that, Jorge. The only time that you need to mess with trans stuff is whenever you have, obviously, a new torque converter. If you want to just kind of adjust the pressures, or if you need to change shift points. But I would just focus on the engine side of it and then just do kind of a standard trans tune after the fact. Looking at this Goblin kit car over here, Ross, it's pretty cool. Are you doing the on-road or the off-road version? Harry, I am an automation programmer, and I was an aircraft electrician back in the day in the Air Force. So they don't offer an engineering discipline for my career field. There's a couple of electrical engineers that do what I do, but for the most part, it is just one of those weird things. Robert Coe, is there anything to be gained on a stock 16 Mustang 5-liter with HP tuners? Yeah, Robert, you could probably pick up 20-25 horsepower on that motor stock just by cleaning the tune up off the factory. It's one of my big things that I like to do. I'm hoping to do a video on that here soon, not necessarily on the Mustang, but I have been looking possibly for a new tuning platform to get into here in the next couple months, and whenever I do, I'm going to do my best to find a stock one. And the first video that we will do is a baseline dyno versus stock, and then baseline dyno, or I guess an after dyno with it just strictly tuned. What kind of power can we pick up off of a tune? It fluctuates, but you know, you can just, depending on the displacement of the engine and how safe the factory tune is, aka how rich and conservative the spark is, you can pick up some decent horsepower on that, on about everything, you know. Zero, I put a video out on the 4L60s. It's almost the same thing, man. Ross, I'm not sure if the Ecotech LSJ has the wideband. You'll have to go to the probably go to one of the forums and ask the guys that are working with those. I would not be surprised if that's one of them that does have the factory widebands. I know the smaller displacement engines that are boosted or whatever generally do. Mr. Squeegeo, any E38 flex fuel spark tips? Tune your base spark map. You can okay, if you can tune your base spark, I would tune my base spark map. I don't know, let me think about it. I'd probably tune it on pump gas, and then jump over to the flex fuel spark table, which is just an additional table. So you got your base table, and then your flex fuel table just adds additional timing on top of your base table for flex fuel. And then you can basically treat it the same way that you would your base table. But if you're only going to run flex fuel, you probably find just tuning your base table regardless and leaving your flex fuel table alone, flex fuel spark table alone. I don't know. Sounds good, Corey. Let me know if you have any other issues or any, come back next week. We're going to get into some Ford stuff. I don't know if we're going to be able to go, I don't know how soon we're going to get into Coyote engine stuff right off the bat, but we are going to start looking at some Ford stuff. I am going to do some videos, as I said, looking at Ford configurations, but I do have a laundry list of stuff that people are asking for, and I'm just trying to churn out information as much as possible. KT, you've got to start somewhere. If your vehicle runs, make very small adjustments and then see how they react, see what happens. Focus on a small area, focus on your cruise fueling or something. You can learn this, and you will gain more confidence as you make these slight adjustments. Watch the videos a couple times, get yourself ingrained on it. I'm going to have a video coming out here soon that talks about one of the best ways of learning your platform. I think you guys will really like it. It's got an exercise in there that I like to do, because even I run into stuff on these configuration files where I'm like, what in the hell is that? And it's a way of going out and figuring out what this stuff is, what it does, and educating yourself. So, and knowledge is power. I think G.I. Joe said that. Robert H., E85 rules until you run out of the capability to push enough fuel. That 30% deficiency on fueling is a pain in the butt on direct injected engines. Ruben Diaz, what size injector should I use for an E85 for a C6 LS3 with cam and FBO? Only go, I guess, Ruben, I would plan out my modification path get an idea of where I want to be, and then size my injectors based off of horsepower, and then remember to add 30% for E85. So where you're at, those mods, I don't know. You shouldn't have to go too crazy on that. You know, full bolt-ons, Ruben, with the cam, just are you running full bolt-ons already with the cam? I mean, I guess that's the question. Atomic Punk. Hold on a second. Dink Player. I didn't mean to skip over you. I have a 96 Firebird. I swapped a 5.348 pistons, hot cam, LS6 springs, intake. Runs it idle. Like crap going down the road. You still got the MAF sensor on there. I would start. You're just going to have to tune the airflow, man. If it runs it idle, you've got something figured out, but if it runs like crap going down the road, you just got fueling issues. Atomic Punk. E78 ECU. When going through the gears, it runs mostly fine in red lines. Flooring it in high gear and letting the boost slowly rises takes all my timing out and accelerates and pops like crap. What is Atomic Punk? What is your vehicle? Guessing, where are you? 2012 Cruise. You need to work backwards, Atomic Punk, and figure out what is taking your timing out. So, look at everything. Well, I mean, if you're still working on getting your VVE dialed in, I would focus on that and keep an eye on your knock sensor. Make sure you're not getting any knock. But after that, you need to work backwards and see what is taking your timing out. So if you go over and look at your spark tables, here, hold on, let me pull this up. This isn't your ECU, but it'll give you an idea. If you look at your spark tables, you have all of these corrections. These corrections are on top of your base table. So you have a high octane table generally and a low octane table, and as you get into flex fuel and stuff like that, or displacement on demand, you'll have multiple different tables. Your high octane table is your base map. Your low octane table is what happens whenever you get knock. It starts transitioning down. If you go over and look at your knock sensors, or your retard and your dwell, you have all of this stuff, which is basically what is considered a PID loop. It has the more knock that you see, the more that it'll pull stuff out, etc., etc. But on top of that, you have all of these other ones, such as IAT, that'll start pulling out timing whenever your intake air temps get hot. I run into this issue a lot with my supercharger since I took my intercooler off. You need to figure out what is pulling that timing out up there whenever you're getting up into that higher end, Atomic Punk, because there's probably something that's fighting you on that. Then on the other side of it, double check your torque tables. Make sure if you have something where you can log what is commanding torque, make sure that something's not pointed out there. Yeah, Ruben, if you have it running, do you have it running on your bolt-ons right now? Because the cam is not going to be a huge significant, it's going to, yes, it's going to require more fuel, but it's not going to be a significant thing. So the question is like kind of what's your duty cycle now? So you need to find out what your duty cycle is now, add a percentage for the cam. And if you go 10% on the cam, you're going to be more than probably covered on that as long as your duty cycle is below 90%. So try and make sure your duty cycle is below 90%, add 10% for your cam based off of your current flow, then add another 30% for your E85, and then maybe another 10 or 20% on top of that for comfort if you want. You should already be in that comfort range of being below the 90% duty cycle on there. But that is kind of a quick and dirty way of calculating your injector sizing from where you're at right now, Ruben. If it is not running right now, if you have not done injectors already, then there's a lot more math that you would have to try and do. Anthony Diaz, when tuning MAF open loop, how close do you get your values? About 1.5%. 1.5% towards the rich side, Anthony, is my preferred area for open loop on the MAF. The MAF is pretty accurate. On speed density, I might let that drift out towards 3 or 4% on the rich side because it's just a little bit harder to get speed density dialed in. PE we're not that concerned about because we're always going to be on the super rich side of PE. So if we are 4% rich in that area of the speed density and then we're adding an additional 20% fuel or whatever for power enrichment, who cares? We might lose a couple horsepower, but we're losing a couple horsepower to be on the safe side. Atomic, there's got to be something going on with 6th gear where you're just staying in it longer. So that's what I would look at. Okay, yeah, Ruben, as I said, I would take your current injector size, calculate out, go another, based on, you got to look at what your duty cycle is right now. Hey, Memo. Hey, 325 L Sonoma, welcome back. Sonoma, Gen 5s do that. Manifold absolute pressure, they are calculating basically kind of a density because they use humidity. So I talked about this before you jumped on. Yeah, sure thing, Ruben. I talked about this before you jumped on 325 that on the Gen 5s for speed density, you're looking at pressure, humidity, barometric pressure, temperature. There's like 5 or 6 different things that are going into it. And in fact, if you look at the LT4s and stuff like that, it gets even more complicated because they have multiple stages of temperature sensors, pressure sensors, etc. So I have not seen what Gail was talking about on that in particular. But I think that for the old ones, I don't know that there would be a way of retrofitting a factory ECU to operate off of a, by bringing in a humidity sensor, but most likely you could use an aftermarket ECU if you're running something like that. Yeah, I know you are, man. I know you are. As I said, I don't know that there's much that you could do on a factory ECU for a Gen 3. Memo, no, I tend to stay away from decapped injectors. I understand why people run them. It is what it is. And I'm not saying that there's people out there that can't do it properly, but... How we doing on time here? We got about 11 minutes, guys. 10, 11 minutes left. As I said, this is going to be a weekly thing, so by all means, make sure and check in next week. Christopher, Yes, filtered math. Filtered math is basically, okay, you got to understand how dynamic airflow works in the first place, where you basically have the mass airflow sensor is your primary air metering system, and the speed density table is a backup. It's the sanity check. So as your mass airflow sensor breathes in, if it starts to get wonky, if it deviates from the commanded fuel, so the fuel that you're commanding off your mass airflow sensor, if it gets way far away from where the speed density table says, it starts freaking out. And that's how, it makes sure that you don't have a dirty math sensor, things like that. Whenever you get past a certain point, that filtered math kind of turns into like a known variable as opposed to or a known constant as opposed to a calculated variable. Blah. Let's look at something here. So, in particular, if you look at it right here, this, as far as I know, mass air mode, the filtering only works above your high RPM disable on your dynamic airflow. Yep, that is true. But as I said, this filter is used to filter the mass air mass in response to a mass air or manifold air pressure or throttle position sensor failure. And so basically it is I'm not sure if they are using that to create a virtual sanity check, because it can no longer reliably use the speed density table. And if I were a betting man, I would guess that this is one of those things that came into play because of the Toyota throttle runaway stuff. If you guys remember that, whenever that stuff happened, where all the Toyotas just were going crazy. Does that make sense, Christopher? I know it was a lot to take in. Sure thing, 325. Appreciate the support, brother. Chevy Rider, been watching your videos. CTSV with a ID 1000, pulley upgrade, putting down 16 pounds of boost. Just need help on to adjust for more power and being safe. Okay, so just focus on the main three. Focus on your airflow and your fueling, which are one and the same. So, and then your spark. It all falls in line. If you have your airflow dialed in properly, it will allow you to dial your spark in properly, and then you will make safe power. .386 Racing Addictions. You have a whole bunch of Mustangs. Let me just go ahead and kick you out of the chat here. There's no reason to have you around. I'm just teasing, man. I look forward to getting more experience on the Fords. We're going to learn some of this stuff together. I'm going to be calling on some of you guys to help me out to understand some of the stuff that's going on, because there's going to be some bridges that I'm not going to be able to, gaps I'm not going to be able to cross just from some of the stuff that I've known in the past. So I'm excited. Chevy, watch my content. I mean, I know you've been watching it, but just kind of spend time with it. Learn the process. The recent ones that I talk about how to tune and kind of my steps of going through and tuning will work for any platform. Sounds good, Ross. Appreciate the help, man. I'm excited to follow your car build out. So make sure and update us as you go through it, and we'll see you next week. Got 5 minutes left here, so let's try and get one more question in here, and then I'm going to do the wrap-up for the night. As I said, I'll say it once more, and I'll start going through the spill as I wait on the last question or two here. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button down there. I'm guessing most of you guys are already subscribed. If you can, do me a favor, throw a thumbs up out there. That's what really drives a lot of this traffic, and you guys sharing it. Somebody shared this on Facebook, shared my channel on Facebook the other day. I got like 80 subscribers in one day. I was blown away. You guys are awesome. I appreciate whoever did that. Keep up the love. I'll keep sending the love out to you guys. Keep on making these videos. Once again, if you want to hit up the Patreon, I'm going to shamelessly promote my own Patreon here. So the link is down in the description below. I'll put it down here at the bottom of the screen. Part of the Patreon is there's a $5 tier that gets you access to things like I gave an eBay Turbo away earlier tonight for any patron. And then on top of it, we do some tuning videos where you guys can send in videos or send in tunes. I'll look at them, do a video, kind of do an overview of some of the things that I might change, and, might learn something on it. So then on top of it, there's a $15 tier, and that one gets you an email that will allow you to actually send in files, and I will help you out if you run into issues while you're tuning. So that's my spiel as far as pimping myself out there. But as always, I appreciate it. Blue Fox, yes, I am near Cannonsburg. Jeff H, see you next time. Appreciate it, man. Darth Giggity, DB drive-by-wire lag adjustment. Tune in next week. We'll talk about that. That's a little bit too much of an in-depth topic to get into here in the last couple minutes. But there are some things specifically. Check out your driver demand table. Make sure that you're not maxing it out. That thing will slow you down. Yeah, Blue Fox, I work in Cannonsburg. Appreciate it, Michael. Thank you for the support. Thanks for being a subscriber. Man, we got time for one more question. Darth, as I said, if nobody else asks a question here, look at look at your driver demand table. I don't know what your application is, and I don't know what this is right now. Oh, this is actually mine. Yeah, look at this is mine. Mine goes up to 925 foot-pounds of torque. That's because that's how crazy my truck is. It's not anymore. I need to dial this back. But double check this out, because if you are capped out on your driver demand table, Garth, it will make your throttle go slow or feel slower than it actually is. Memo, Gen 5 with some good add-ons with E85. Boost. Throw a supercharger on there, Memo. Sure, thanks, Cypress L90. Sorry you missed it, man, but check in next Thursday. We're going to try to make this a Thursday thing. Oh, awesome, Atomic Pump. I was wondering where everybody came from, so appreciate that. I don't do Facebook anymore. It's the end days, basically. Okay, guys, we're going to wrap it up right there. I want to thank everybody once again for stopping by. You guys are the best. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for all the likes out there. We will see you guys next Thursday. Same garage time, same garage place. So you guys have a great night.